It looks like there was some assessment regarding depression on the second row. Is that true?
Yes. The doctor indicated there was no evidence of depression, but there was evidence of anxiety, insomnia, and fatigue, as well as alcohol use.
If any record would have noted the term suicidal ideation, would you have noted that?
Yes, I was certainly looking specifically for indications of suicidality, since that was in the differential for manner of death.
What does the term suicidal ideation mean?
It means that a patient says that I have thought about killing myself, and it could be just that statement, or it could be I thought about killing myself by jumping off a bridge, getting more specific.
In terms of the first 2 pages that the jury's already looked at, did you note that in either of those pages?
No, because it didn't exist.
All right, turning now to the eye drops murder trial. The active ingredient in the drops, tetrahydrozoline, is toxic at high doses. Now, in this case, Lynn Hernan died after drinking water that had the contents of 6 bottles of eye drops in it. Now, the prosecutors say the defendant, Jessy Kurczewski, intentionally killed her longtime friend so she could get access to her assets, including a car and a condo and lots of money. But the defense says Lynn Hernan wasn't the victim of homicide. They say that she wanted her own life taken. Now, today we heard from the medical examiner who performed the autopsy. Let's take a listen.
So the cause of death I determined was tetrahydrozoline poisoning. I also determined that there were other significant conditions. I think it's important to say that the CDC has instructions on filling out a death certificate, and other significant conditions should not include things that are historical. It should include things that affect the cause of death in a significant way. So you should be able to say why you put that in there. So under that conditions, I included a number of other medications, including baclofen, ropinirole, alprazolam, hydrocodone, and cyclobenzaprine use, other medications. I also put in some of her important natural diseases, including interstitial myocarditis, hypertension, hepatic steatosis, and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Then I have to determine a manner of death. I have to pick one of the 5 manners, and I determined it was a homicide, which is a medical determination, not based on law enforcement or criminal rules. It's a public health determination, actually. And how this injury occurred is that she was given tetrahydrozoline by another, which is why I called it a homicide. If it was self-administered, it would be something else. And the use of baclofen, ropinirole, alprazolam, hydrocodone, and cyclobenzaprine. So I have to indicate all of those unnatural conditions as injury.
When you received the toxicology, did you end up contacting Nms Labs?
Yes.
Why?
Because there was a substance that I was an unusual finding that I hadn't seen in a report from their facility before. It was called tetrahydrozoline.
Why did you contact the lab about that?
I wanted to know specifically if there was more testing that should be done. In other words, if you find a surprising finding, many of the findings in their toxicology report were things that I was familiar with and were found in her investigation in terms of the medication she had access to. But tetrahydrozoline just sort of came out of nowhere. So I called them and I said, what's your experience with this? Should I send another specimen? Can we confirm it through another means? Because this is an unexpected result.
All right, joining me to discuss is forensic analyst and the host of the podcast Body Bags, Joseph Scott Morgan. Joseph, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. Help us get a better understanding of tetrahydrozoline, right? And so let me begin by saying, as best you can, what exactly is it? And even more importantly, why is it in Visine?
Well, it's used to, as we've heard for years and years, get the red out, right? So it's a counter to any kind of allergic reaction that we might have as it applies to the eyes. It is a topical medication that can be applied directly to the eyes. And interestingly enough is when it's when it's applied topically like this, it flushes through the system relatively quickly, but it knocks down that kind of congestion that we have in our eyes, and it also soothes some of that burning that comes along. And you got several combinations that are out there. People put stuff in their eyes for dry eyes. A lot of people have dry eye syndrome, and tetrahydrozoline will be included in some of those mixtures as well. But here's the thing, Michael, it's not meant for consumption. That means to take it on board orally, and it becomes very lethal. It has some very nasty side effects, even in a lesser dosage than what this poor woman received, Michael.
Let me ask you this. The defense made a very definitive statement that there's never been a death from a tetrahydrozoline overdose. They made that very clear. They say they're going to call the foremost expert on tetrahydrozoline in to testify. We just heard the medical examiner, I thought, give a very reasoned explanation as to why she came to a conclusion that that was the cause of death, or the substantial cause of death in this case. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I do. I know that I've covered at least 2 cases, one out of South Carolina, and there was a combination case out of Colorado. If I remember, that was applied per a dentist allegedly, but it was a combination of a variety of drugs. But here's the thing, did you hear how, and she did a fantastic job actually kind of breaking this down for the jury, Michael, when she talked about some of the underlying conditions that the victim had. When she's talking about some of the heart issues, she's got issues relative to also pulmonary issues. So just imagine it like this. If you're already at a certain level of fragility with your health and you ingest something like tetrahydrozoline, and mind you, a full bottle of tetrahydrozoline or the eye drops themselves generally come in a 0.5 ounce bottle. She had 6 of these that were allegedly placed into the water bottle. Just one of those bottles could have easily sent her into an almost comatose state. You have 6. Kind of how this manifests itself is that your BP spikes, and then all of a sudden it drops precipitously. And after you kind of go into that drop, it's almost impossible to recover from that. The individual actually goes into a comatose state. They're going to have difficulty breathing. She's already got pulmonary issues, as the doctor referred to this. And then on top of that, she's got these other medications on board, Michael. I think I noticed a couple of like anti-anxiety issues or meds in there as well.
Pain meds,
so you've
too.
kind of got this dangerous cocktail that's formulating there. She's already got these other drugs existing and indwelling in her system prior to exposure to the tetrahydrozoline.
All right, so what type of death are we talking about here? Because I looked up some cases as well, and you let me know what you found. She mentioned some cases as well that she looked into as she was doing her research. This is the medical examiner. And the ones I found, the death wasn't immediate. That folks were taken to the hospital, and it took time, maybe 2 days, 3 days, then they died. This was not that type of situation. Does that give you cause for concern?
Yeah, it does. And here's the thing about this, and is kind of intriguing from a scientific and a forensic standpoint. Most of these cases, and I know specifically what you're talking about, the perpetrators in those cases were almost kind of slow walking or microdosing the victims. Okay, so they would just apply a little bit over a period of time, say daily, and generally obviously poisoners fit a very specific kind of profile as opposed to every other type of perpetrator out there. They can be very stealthy, and they have to be in what they're doing. So they have to have access to things that are ingestible. And if you are a caretaker with someone, such as in this case, or say you're in that familial circle where you're very intimate with the individual, gee, hun, let me get you a protein drink real quick. And the next thing you know, they're placing tetrahydrozoline in there, and they're slow dosing this stuff, and the system begins to kind of break down over a period of time. The person will become very lethargic and tired. They might have palpitations periodically with their heart. You'll see spikes in their blood pressure. They'll drop, but they get back to kind of a normal level after a period of time. But once they continue dosing over a long period of time, it takes a toll. Not in this case, though. Those are chronic exposures. This is an acute case. So When this drug was applied to her, Michael, this substance into her water, she crashed relatively quickly. My understanding is, if you're looking at a timeline here, she's given a bottle of water. They allege that the substance was contained in the bottle of water, and then this alleged perpetrator exited. You know, she went out to shop or whatever it was. This person trusted her with the water, so she's, you know, taking in this water, and all the while she's taking in something that's very, very toxic. And all those things that I mentioned, those physiological changes that we were referring to, they would have taken place in a very short order over that period of time. So by the time she shows back up, this poor woman is deceased, or at least at death's doorstep.
So let me ask you, it sounds like you're telling me it's a profile of the type of drug that someone would give to someone else, not that it's not something someone would use in the case of a suicide.
I suppose that it could be. There are any number of methodologies that I've covered over the course of my life as a death investigator for suicide. Yes, I personally have never encountered it. I'd like to see the literature relative to self-ingestion with this. That's not accidental. You have a lot of kids. There's a lot in the literature about children accidentally ingesting, this substance. But for intentional purposes, I haven't encountered that. Not to say they don't exist. It's a big world out there, as you know, Michael. But I haven't encountered it personally. It would be an outlier as far as I'm concerned.
All right, one final question. I only got 10 seconds left. There was some suggestion by the defendant that this victim liked to take drops with her vodka, or occasionally. Is there any sense that this causes some kind of, is it useful for recreational use?
I've never experienced that in any investigation or any of these cases I've looked into. I don't know that there's any kind of altered state that an individual, from a psychological standpoint, would enter into, or psychopharmacological state that they would enter into. Again, that would have to be something I would explore further. You certainly whet my appetite for that. But yeah, it would be an outlier again.
All right. Well, thanks to our special guest, Joseph Scott Morgan. Truly appreciate you joining us tonight. Really great information. I know I feel like I know a lot more about this crazy drug. All right.